Hello, welcome to this episode of Totally Schway Flip Side. My name is Luke.
And I'm Mary.
We flipped on the introductions. Normally Mary does them, I'm doing them this time. It's because I'm a faster talker. As you may have noticed. Yeah, we're assuming that you've already listened to episode 1 of our Caped Crusader series, so I guess we don't need to explain it again. But then again, for those people that haven't and have just jumped straight to this one, we're going through each episode one by one, releasing them all at the same time on Caped Crusader launch day.
Spoilers.
Yeah, and it's going to be full of spoilers, so we're going to talk about the second episode. Now, the first thing that jumped out at me is that this episode is a Renee Montoya story, and it is written by Greg Rucka, who you probably won't know who he is because you don't really read the Batman comics. He was the co-writer of Gotham Central, the comic book about the Gotham City Police Department that was also written by Ed Brubaker, who's this series' lead writer.
Ooh, we love them.
He wrote the Half-a-Life story for Renee Montoya that outed her as a lesbian after she was being blackmailed. It was an award-winning story.
We love that.
So he's got a deep connection with Renee Montoya. He really popularised her character when he was writing the Detective Comics series for DC. And I have to say up front, this was my favourite episode of the whole series, by far.
Very good one.
Yeah. So what's your first point, Mary?
So my first point, it's so funny. Renee Montoya is the best kind of cop.
Yeah.
And I say this because in the first episode, we find that Bullock isn't the jolly good cop that we are fond of from BTAS, but he is a dirtbag.
Yes, he is.
To say
He and Detective Flass are absolute scumbags.
Yeah. Whereas Renee fights for people. Mm-hmm. And not just, just like with Barbara, you might have done the crime, but you've done the time, you've redeemed. But Renee fights for everybody.
Yeah. She's recently been promoted to the role of detective, and Bullock and Flass give her crap for it.
And of course they do.
Because, they're dickheads. And she also kind of second guesses herself a few times in this, doesn't she? Because she, like when she... No, I can spoil it. I was going to think of a way to not spoil it. So basically, she decides that Basil Carlo is the perpetrator in the kidnapping of what was the actress's name? It was Yvonne something.
Yeah, Yvonne something.
Yeah, Yvonne something, of course. Should have looked this up, really. I had a whole spreadsheet where I wrote down all the characters and who played them. But anyway, but she goes to Carlo's house ready to question him and finds him dead.
Yeah.
And then she... goes back to the GCPD with her tail between her legs, and she apologises to Commissioner Gordon, saying she was absolutely certain, based on all the evidence that had been presented to her, that Carlo was the perpetrator, but he was just murdered. Mm-hmm. So it can't have been him.
Oh, but it was.
Yes, it was. Now, she wasn't accounting for this episode being about weird science.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's a good explanation.
Yeah, it's kind of. Let's actually talk about Basil Carlo.
We'll get to my second point.
Oh, is that your second point? Go on then.
So there have been other...
There have been loads of Clayfaces, at least 6, maybe 7.
And I've put on here, Basil Carlo is older than he has been in what we've seen before.
In cartoons, yes. So in
cartoons.
In the Golden Age original Clayface story, he was an old actor that wanted to be involved in a movie and was not involved, or was only partially involved.
Ageist.
Yeah, and so he donned a mask to look that was called the Clayface mask. It was made out of not putty, but basically old timey makeup.
Yeah. And
he went around stabbing people in his cast and crew that he didn't like. And he didn't have any powers or anything like that. He was called Clayface because somebody had touched his face and the residue was left on their hands, and it was like clay.
Okay, I never knew that.
Yes, yeah. That's why the character is called Clayface, despite the fact most of them, their entire bodies are made of clay. It's not just their face. It's a reference back to Basil Carlo and his mask. Now this Basil Carlo, as Mary, you said, he is an older actor that has a very distinctive look. Now he's got a very transatlantic accent, doesn't he? He talks very properly.
He reminds me of a mix between Vincent Price and, actually, I don't know, John Waters.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I can see that, because there is a kind of campy element to his voice.
But it's also just the way that he looks and the way that he speaks.
Yeah.
I can see that as well. But it's more like a Vincent Price if he was from Maine.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do. And the thing with Basil is, I felt he always just looked really tired.
Yeah.
But that's just his face. And he's always, as he said, I always played the heavy. Like, when I look at him, I don't think a tough guy.
No.
I don't think maybe a creepy villain, but not like a menacing tough guy. But he wanted different roles. But he didn't have the face for it. As one of the directors that Montoya interviews, they say the camera can be very kind to some people, it can be very cruel to others. And to Basil, it was very cruel.
Yeah, that's, again, I'm just going to talk about my points a little
okay.
bit. One of them is poor Basil. Total Hollywood bullshit.
Yes.
And that's going on to this.
Yeah, he absolutely hates his life.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of become obsessed with his co-star Yvonne as well, and he thinks that if he fixes his face somehow, she will love him. And one of the makeup artists at the studio thinks that he's on to a solution for changing people's faces. He just needs funding, and Basil is desperate and will fund him.
We all know someone like that.
Yeah, and what I really loved about this scene is it's all conveyed through an interrogation, or an interview, I should say, because Montoya's not necessarily interrogating the cast and the actors.
Yeah.
She's just interviewing them, and it shows little flashbacks. So there's like one in the court, the forecourt of the studio, where Basil's like shouting at this makeup artist saying, "You need to give me something now, I'm desperate, damn it." Mm-hmm. And or give me my money back, you fraud. And then the guy punches him. But the thing I love the absolute most about this scene is that half the people that Montoya is interviewing are actually Basil.
Yeah.
Because he has taken that formula that allows him to resculpt his face. He's not able to transform on command. Mm-hmm. He has to like move his skin around to resemble these people. And he is playing them. And he does a good job. Mm-hmm. He does a good job. He is a good actor. But it's just so funny hearing like the co-star on the exercise bike going, yes, Basil was one of the greatest actors of our time. Oh. Not realising on the first watch that that's Basil talking about himself.
Isn't the one of the exercise bike, he says something really funny about not my time.
Yes.
I loved that.
What about those stories in the newspaper about you and Yvonne? He's like, don't worry, she's not my type.
I love that. It was just such a lovely kind of jokey type thing.
I don't know if it's true, because it was Basil saying it.
Yeah,
he might have been.
I love the fact that was in there.
Yeah, but the funny thing is though that while this interview is taking place with Basil pretending to be this guy, that guy's body is like 10 feet away underground, under the stage.
Creepy.
Yeah, it's really creepy and delightful. And this episode is such a love letter to noir movies, particularly Hitchcock. And the music is... It just reminded me of the music from Psycho. Now, I'm not talking about like the stabby music. I'm talking about the opening when... what was the actress's name that was in Psycho? I've forgotten her name.
Vivian Leigh?
Vivian Leigh? No, not Vivian Leigh.
Not Vivian Leigh. Well, who am I? No. Where am I?
Janet Leigh.
Janet Leigh,
that was it.
Yeah.
Where Janet Leigh has stolen the money and then she's like driving away and she's on edge all the time. There are scenes like that with Montoya where she's driving around and the music just reminded me of that. It was the strings. They don't make music like this anymore.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Or at least I thought so until I watched this.
This is such... that's a perfect way to say a love letter to those types of movies.
Oh, it absolutely
and it's just, you can watch this and be like, these are fans.
Yeah.
But they're fans that know how to use their inspiration.
Yes, yeah. And the one of the other things I really love about this is Batman's hardly in it. I mean, he is in a couple of scenes, obviously. He fights with Clayface.
It's Renee.
Yeah, but it's mostly about Montoya. I really liked the scene where she's going to what she thinks is that makeup artist's home. I've forgotten that character's name. I wish I'd loaded up that spreadsheet so then I could just read it out. And she calls for backup, and Flass and Bullock respond, say, "Yeah, we're on the way," and then they turn the radio off and continue eating their sandwiches. Mm-hmm. and she decides to go in herself. Now, Montoya knows that something is up based on the way that guy is acting. And she's like, he asks her why she's there. She says, well, I was given your name as part of a line of investigation. And, it's funny with these investigations, they tend to go one of two ways. There's like the easy way or there's the hard way. Which way do you want it to go? Now, she doesn't realise, again, that this is Basil.
Yeah.
So she punches him in the face. And his face just gets an indent from her fist. And they have this wonderful visual cue where his eyes, he's wearing glasses, but you can't see his eyeballs anymore. It's just like blank, completely blank, making him look really unhuman. Inhuman, excuse me. And he clobbers her around the head with a metal bar and knocks her out and ties her up and then wants to explain his grand scheme. He's so over the top.
Narcissistic actor.
Yeah.
BS.
Yeah, he explains his origin, and there's a really wonderful callback to the third Clayface, Preston Payne's origin, because he had similar motivations. He had a disease that kind of made him a bit deformed, and people weren't very kind to him. So he just wanted to be handsome and go on dates. So he found this formula that he injected himself with. I suppose he created it, really. And he was able to sculpt his face. And he went on dates, but it kind of... after a certain amount of time, his body started to melt. And something similar happens to Basil in that he approaches Yvonne and he says, don't ask me any questions about my face, darling. It's me, Basil. I'm yours if you'll have me. And she's just like, no. And that rejection causes his face to just droop and melt. And he tries to hold on, but then he just gives in and goes, and grabs her.
Okay, I have another point.
Go on then.
Because we talked about the person that Basil has essentially kidnapped.
Yes.
Again with the big beds.
Oh yes, yeah. He ties her up in a massive bed.
Yeah, it's like it's a nod to Lois Lane from Superman the animated series. That was just a fun little thing because the bed doesn't look huge in every scene, but there's one scene in particular where it's like, oh.
Yeah, it's like a 5-person bed.
Yeah.
One of those Hollywood beds, eh?
Yeah, I love that.
That scene actually made me go, oh no, when I first watched it, because she's tied up in bed in her nightgown and Clayface is there as that makeup artist going, oh, please, Miss Yvonne, don't get too worked up. You'll mess up your makeup. Your makeup will be ruined for your big scene. And then the lights come on and cameras come on. I'm like, oh no, what kind of scene? Yeah. Oh no.
It gave you the ickies. And I think they meant, obviously they meant for that. And, going on to the next part of the episode, and my final point, cool sword fight.
Yes, yeah, that was
really
an Errol Finn sword fight, surely.
It really, really reminded me of a specific movie that I cannot remember the name of, but I think
it was the Three Musketeers.
Yeah,
I think.
And it was just like, oh wow.
Yeah.
So, I'm very descriptive and very articulate, you see.
So Clayface chucks a fencing sword at Batman, sticks it in the wall, and then lunges at him with another one. Batman grabs the one out of the wall, and then they're actually having a little sword fight.
But it's very... walking
up the stairs as they're doing it.
But again, it's going back to BTAS, where the fight scenes weren't just fight scenes. They were like stylized movie scene type things with like music and stuff like that. This really reminded me of that.
Yeah.
But it also, like you said, reminded me of like the Three Musketeers and a lot of those old school movies that I just love.
Might have been Robin Hood as well. I think they had a scene that was like that. I might be misremembering though.
But I think it is the Three Musketeers because it's the fencing sword.
Yeah.
But it was just, and I'm going to say this a lot about this show because I truly do believe it's beautiful, but it is very much just, I cannot stress this enough. I think you should watch old movies now. Like, not Luke and I do watch old movies, but...
seen them all.
If if you love the way that this makes you feel, you will love watching like old Errol Flynn, Mae West,
Alfred Hitchcock movies.
Definitely Alfred Hitchcock. If you have not seen Psycho, which a lot of people haven't, the original Psycho, please just watch it on Amazon.
Yeah.
Not that we're affiliated with Amazon at all.
No,
but
they don't pay me anything.
No.
I got paid in early access to Caped Crusader, which made me happy.
You will see what I mean. Or, yeah, you will actually see and feel what I mean by this. Again, my total articulate side there.
Yeah, so something I want to talk about is, in the last episode, we talked about how they were very deliberately trying to be different with their interpretation of the villain. And this Clayface is nothing at all like the Ron Perlman Clayface. So first of all, he does this to himself.
Yeah.
He is the one that is pursuing this treatment to get his face to become malleable. Mm-hmm. And he loves it. He absolutely loves it. He embraces it. Now, obviously, I mean, I say obviously, I personally think that injecting that chemical into his face has also made his brain malleable. And he's just kind of gone a bit warped because of it. But he says to Montoya that, you know, this appearance of his has made him realise that he was born to play villains. And now he's got a face that can match his talent because he can become anyone and anything. Mm-hmm. The early press releases talked about how he was seeking revenge against people that had wronged him. And I thought they were talking about, you know, it's going to be a bit like Feet of Clay, where, you know, he blames the people that gave him the substance.
Yeah.
And wants to get revenge on them. But that's not the case.
No, it's not. It's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the twist in the episode, you know, how Basil Karlo was murdered, but then still running around as Clayface, is the makeup artist Basil basically injected him with the formula and made him look like himself and murdered him. Mm-hmm. And then left the body there. There's a delightful scene where Batman goes to the morgue to examine the body and he pokes his face, the corpse of Basil Karlo's face, and his finger just keeps going in. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh my God, this isn't Basil Karlo.
Yeah.
Clayface is almost the opposite. He forced someone to become a monster and murdered them and changed their appearance against their will. He is the one that he loves deceiving people. He loves pretending to be someone he's not. And all of these people he's murdering are just people that he didn't like. You know, the head of the studio who potentially had said he was too ugly to be a leading man. He electrocutes him to death and he laughs while he's doing it. The co-star who in the papers it said has been having a relationship with Yvonne murders him out of jealousy. Mm-hmm. He doesn't murder Yvonne because he claims to love her, but he doesn't love her.
No.
He's just like pining after her. He's identified her as this object that he must have in order to feel like a successful person.
Narcissist good at narcissist.
Yeah, completely. And when she rejects him, it causes him to have his meltdown. And it's funny, you know, he could have just murdered her, but instead he ties her up in a bed and then sets up a camera where she's tied to a table with like a swinging saw coming lower and lower to slice her in half. Obviously, it's a torturous and agonizing death if it were to happen. Mm-hmm. But it's replicating something that he did on screen in a movie with her. Yep. And he's just living in this fantasy world where he thinks that, you know, all it would take to change his life is if he just looked a little bit different. And what it really shows is that it's not his appearance that was holding him back. It's just him.
Yeah.
It's just him. That's really all it was.
A story we all know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to mention something about the ladies in this series. Not all of them look like Selena Kyle.
No.
I love the fact that Renee Montoya, not obese, not pudgy, not anything like that, has the body of a woman.
Yeah, it's funny. When she wears her big overcoat, she looks massive. But when she takes the overcoat off, she looks like a normal person. Yeah. But the same thing is true of all of the characters.
Yeah.
Like Commissioner Gordon puts on his coat
God,
and suddenly he's like 8 feet wide.
It's the shoulder pads.
Yeah, well, someone get me one of those coats.
Even in I think it's in 2 episodes' time we'll meet Miss Quinzel.
No, it's next episode.
Oh, next episode we meet Dr. Quinzel, and you see that it's not like stick legs.
No,
It's like actual like real lady legs,
Yeah,
and
curvy.
it's really nice. As someone who's on the a little bit bigger than average, but not like too big. I like to see that because it's like if I would have seen that as a little girl in BTAS or something, I would have been like, "Oh, shut the front door! That person looks like me." Do you know what I mean? Like it would
can imagine.
it would have been really lovely to see that, but now it's like it's there, and I just as soon as I saw like the calves, I should say, I was like, yes, 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 yes. Thank you. That is what a woman looks like.
yeah, and there's often been criticism of Bruce Timm's art style is that all the women look the same except they've just got different haircuts. And maybe he's taken this to heart. It was probably that the characters were designed by other people. I know James Tucker designed Catwoman, for instance. But the women do look distinct. Now, obviously, they all have that. All of the characters have that, typical Bruce Timm look. The men have got broad shoulders and narrow legs
Because it's a cartoon. And
Yeah.
I need to come back on this. When
Sure.
I say they look like women, all women are different. What I mean is more women that look like me.
And I realised I misspoke earlier when I said she looks like a normal woman when she takes
Yeah.
her coat off. I don't mean that anyone that is broad is abnormal, because I'm very broad.
No, and I am I think I'm a very woke PC person. And what I do want to say that Renee Montoya's body in this reminds me more of mine, although I'm a bit pudgier, than anyone, and I love that. So thank you, creators.
So, one thing this episode kind of reminded me of is that this is really peculiar because this show has got a higher age rating than Batman the Animated Series did, I think.
But it didn't feel like that.
Yeah, so I mentioned Feet of Clay before. That origin of Clayface is the most horrific thing I had ever seen as a child, and it really upset me. There's nothing in this series that is even comparable to that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they have fewer restrictions, but they are being far more restrained.
Yeah, but that's something I said in our previous episode, is
Yeah.
that it's not anti-Batman. We're going to
No.
do this completely different. We're going to show blood on the screen, and we're just going to do slasher things.
And it's all sex and violence. Yeah.
But there was sex and violence in this. As in, it's insinuated sex and stuff like that. But it was done tastefully without going overboard. And I like that.
Do you know what we forgot to mention?
Well,
One of the things that happens right at the start of the episode, after Yvonne is
what?
kidnapped.
say what?
Who is the first person that Renee Montoya called in to interview? It's Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Because he was on a date with her that night, and he and Alfred dropped her off. And
Brucey.
there's a really wonderful, I know I say this, there's a wonderful scene, but when Montoya's interrogating Bruce, he drops the facade. And she's like, what time did you drop Yvonne off? And he goes, at exactly 10:52.
Yeah, he literally does that. Like, Hamish is so good at this. And I know it's probably written into the script and
Yeah, of
everything.
course.
But the way that Hamish does this doesn't make it too obvious. Because when Luke mentions this, I didn't realize that until he just mentioned it. And then it played in my head. I was like, holy moly, that's exactly what happened. He dropped the act.
Yeah, for a sentence or two.
Yeah.
And then he remembers and he gets back to it and like, yeah. Oh, I only remember that because she had an early start and I was mindful of the time, is what
Yeah.
he says.
It
Which
was
is true.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and we get an introduction to Lucius Fox in this show as
Yeah.
well. So Lucius Fox is actually Bruce Wayne's lawyer rather than like the head of Wayne Enterprises. But he comes barging in and tells Montoya to stop asking questions, let Bruce go right now unless he's a suspect. He's not.
The person who did Renee Montoya's voice.
Yes.
Beautiful. I
Yes.
love there's just, it wasn't like your typical like New York accent, because this isn't New York, this is Gotham.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just your typical, like, white girl accent. I know that's, I probably shouldn't call it that, but it is like your typical, like, European type accent.
Yeah.
This voice actress did such a great job at making this character have their own sort of style of talking and everything. And it didn't feel forced. It felt as if, like, you would hear this person while walking down the street.
Yeah.
Again, I hope that makes sense.
It made sense to me, yeah. Yeah, you basically feel that she had an authentic Hispanic hint to her voice.
Yes. As someone who grew up in Oklahoma, where there are a lot of Hispanic people there, I know what someone sounds like.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, it was great. And it wasn't one of those over the top caricature.
Not like a Speedy Gonzalez voice or anything like that.
It was just really lovely to hear. And it's so nice to have that sort of character out there. And this character only gets better.
Yeah. Yeah, she does, because she's demonstrably a shrewd investigator. From her line of questioning with Basil in his I guess it's his makeup room, and he says to her, like, "Oh, I must go because I'm having a meeting with the head of the studio." And then she goes and speaks to the head of the studio secretary, who says, "No, there's no meeting between Mr. Carlo and the studio head today." Immediately, red flags.
She's a good one.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention is there's a nice Batman the Animated Series reference in this episode, and I bet you didn't notice it. Not to, like...
But me?
Yeah, I bet most people didn't notice it.
Did I notice it?
No, you didn't.
Oh.
Well, maybe you did. So when Montoya's looking at the photograph of Yvonne, and I think it's her co-star, at a premiere of a movie, did you notice the name of the movie they were attending?
No.
Gangbuster. Gangbuster was the Matt Hagen movie from Feet of Clay.
Shut the front door.
Yes. I saw that and I went,
ooh.
Ooh.
See, it shows that this show is a fan of the old show.
Well, yeah, of course. And it's funny, like, out of all of the people involved in that show, I think the only person that worked on Batman the Animated Series was Bruce Timm. It's pretty much all new people.
Brucey T.
Even James Tucker didn't work on Batman the Animated Series. He started with Superman. And I think that's one of the things he mentioned. It's like, this is his opportunity to go back and do a BTAS style show.
And that's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And there are so, as I think you mentioned this in the first episode, there are so many references to Batman the Animated Series throughout this show, whether it's specific shots that are homages, and in an upcoming episode there's a newspaper.
And the new Batman adventures as well.
Yes, yeah. There's a newspaper in an upcoming episode where every headline is a reference to a BTAS episode. And don't you worry, I'm going to read them all out in that podcast episode when we record it.
So yeah, did you say this was your favorite episode?
It was. Yeah. And it's funny how I tend to prefer the episodes that Batman isn't in very much. So Batman plants a bug on Montoya's massive coat that we spoke about before. So no wonder she didn't find that bug on her lapel, because it's bloody massive. But so he's just in the background most of the time. You occasionally see him at a window listening in on what Montoya's discovering. And he obviously turns up when he's needed to. When Montoya's been tied to a chair and Yvonne's going to be sliced in half with a slowly lowering swinging axe, he turns up and when he gets into the fight with Clayface and starts punching him in the face, there is I really wish they lingered on this shot a lot longer than they did. It's only there for a second or so. But you see Clayface's face has become completely warped, like his eyeballs are where his chin should be or whatever, because Batman's been punching him so much.
Oh, did we mention, actually mention this?
What?
Renee, still gay.
Yeah, but they don't talk about that until a later episode.
And I love that they did not. That's one thing that I really, because when I knew that Renee was going to be a part of this, I was like, they better not take that away, because I think that character was quite groundbreaking in terms of having cartoons be Although it was suggested but not actually said.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean, it was the comics that really cemented it, and then the tie-in comics for the new Batman, Batman: The Adventures Continue. They came out and said, yes, here she is a lesbian. Here is her girlfriend.
Yeah. But as you know, that's really important to me. Where they don't take something like that away.
Yeah, no, they absolutely didn't, and they handled
And I
it.
needed to mention it because I love it.
Like we said in the last episode, you know, that queer people exist in this show, and they just exist, and they don't make a big song and dance about it. They're just like, hey, I want to go on a date with that person.
We're not all X-Men. Oh, that's the wrong. We're on the wrong episode.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we've talked about X-Men too much. I think it's just X-Men on the brain.
Yeah. So yeah, that was episode 2.
Yes. I don't think I had anything else to say about it. We said that this is my favourite episode. Go on, you've got something.
No, I don't. I was just saying that I already said it was episode 2, didn't I? I was trying to remember if I actually said it was episode 2.
You look like you were going to say something like, au contraire. You need to say this.
No.
But no. Yeah, I mean, I think that this probably was my favourite episode just because of the atmosphere. And it was not at all what I was expecting it to be. I knew Greg Rucka was writing the second episode, but I didn't know he was writing the Clayface story. When I saw that Greg Rucka was writing it, I was like, okay, that's the Montoya episode. Oh, it might involve her getting outed as a lesbian and then all the problems that might bring up. But, you know, I'm so glad they didn't do that. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad they didn't do that. It's not a big deal. Everybody knows. Nobody cares.
Refreshing. I'll say it again every time.
Yeah.
So, like I said in the last episode, we're not going to do comments on this episode.
Because it's pre-recorded.
Yeah, but we will come back to the comments at some point.
Yeah. We'll probably end up just responding to most of them.
Yeah.
Rather than like doing a whole video of like, hey, let's respond to every single comment. Because I know that 10 big Mikey P comments would take up a 2-hour video.
No, we're going to do a whole video about Big Mikey P comments because I love reading his comments.
You can read them.
Could you imagine me reading all of those comments?
Yeah.
Because you usually read them because you're not as anxious as I am. But I'm like, how are they actually saying this in their head? And then I get in my head about it. I'm like, but what if I offend somebody if they were actually wanting to be angry? But I was jolly. Mm-hmm. All right, enough about that. We will see you, or we will hear you and listen to you. No?
You'll hear us.
Yeah, that. In the next episode, which you can listen to right now.
Yes, move on to the next episode, which is about the Catwoman episode.
Yes. Bye, love you. Mean it.
Thanks, bye.
Mean it.